Rima Fadlallah here, proud daughter of Dearborn, professional love letter, and avid vibe capitalist. And today I'm joined by these three amazing women. We have Neda, a Palestinian woman, cat connoisseur, and coffee lover. Right next to me on the left, we have Sammar, modest girl, postpartum depression warrior, and fashion enthusiast. And across from me, we have Nour, bookworm, foodie, and appreciator of nature. Thank you so much for joining me today, ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. So we always kick off this season's episodes with this question, and it relates to our theme. Our theme for this season is never sleep on a DG. So I just want to take the chance to let each of you respond to that. What does that mean to you? And we'll start with you.
Never sleep on a Dearborn girl means never judge a Dearborn girl by her cover. The way she looks, the way she dresses, the way she talks. You never know what someone's personality is going to be. You never know what they've accomplished. So I think that's the number one thing. Until you get to know one, you never know what you're going to get with a Dearborn girl.
Yes, I love that. If you want to.
Never sleep on a DG to me means even if a Dearborn girl has a thick Dearborn accent, it doesn't mean she's not going places in life.
That's such a good point. Like, we need a whole episode just on that, actually. What about you, Sammar?
For me personally, I think it means to be strong and to never give up, even what you're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Thank you, ladies. So we are talking about mental health today. And so our more general question on the table today is, I want to hear from each of you about one mental health related issue. I know there's plenty, but what specific mental health related issue in our community particularly frustrates you and why?
For me personally, I believe postpartum depression, because living in Dearborn and being in the Arab and Muslim community, they don't take it seriously. They take it like as a joke. Oh, she'll get over it.
Yeah.
Like the mom will get over it.
Yeah. Can you, before you explain that, can you, like, for people who don't know what it is or might have like preconceived notions about it, can you just explain, like, what does it mean for someone to be struggling with postpartum depression?
Well, there's two different forms. There's baby blues, which is right after you deliver, and it lasts up to 3 months.
Okay.
Then there's postpartum depression, which can last up to 4 or 5 years after you give birth. And that's the difference.
What are people experiencing in the latter form of it?
They experience they don't want to go out. They just want to stay home. They are distant from their child. They really just don't want to do anything. Crying all the time, not eating, not sleeping. I mean, there's just so many aspects of it. And it's really sad that people don't take it seriously.
Okay. Yeah. I think the awareness about that, especially there's so many mothers in the community that I'm sure have dealt with it or are dealing with it as we speak, who might not feel comfortable even admitting that or talking to anyone about it. Yeah. We're definitely coming back to that. What about you all?
Along with postpartum depression, I think just depression in general is a big stigma in our community. People look at it as, you'll get over it. It's just some bump in the road. You're not clinically depressed, and it's more on a hush-hush where people don't really talk about it. People think it doesn't exist, but the truth is that mental, illness, it doesn't discriminate. Just because you're head up doesn't mean you can't have a mental illness. In our community, I think it's becoming a really big problem, especially because it's leading our youth to turn to drugs and, just going down the wrong road because they don't know who to ask for help. They feel like they can't talk about it with their families. They feel like their friends will judge them, and they don't have a safe space to talk about it. And I think that we need to open it up more, the conversation in our community, and make it okay, to talk about having depression, whether, you need to talk to someone who you feel comfortable around, going to therapy. It's not normalized enough, and I think it should be as normal as, going to see a doctor. Any doctor, it should be as normalized as that.
I think for me, the one mental health issue in our community that I care deeply about is anxiety, because I think a lot of people, myself included, have been written off as crazy, ungrateful, whereas the reality is that anxiety are these compulsive thoughts that you truly do not have any control over. And going to like one yoga class isn't going to solve the type of anxiety that I have. Anxiety is something that everybody around you needs to know that you have so that they know how to interact with you. And I think it's really great that Dearborn Girl and Access, they're really opening up the discussion about anxiety and depression, because more people are aware that, hey, if my friend or my family member treats me a certain way, maybe it's because they're projecting something onto me that they're going through. And like, how can I communicate that with them and work through with them?
You said something really interesting at the beginning about people perceiving you or other people that deal with anxiety as ungrateful. Mm-hmm. Why would that be the perception? I'm curious. Or were there any moments that like you can share either from your experience or from someone else's experience where something you did made someone think you were being ungrateful, but really it was a root of anxiety?
Yeah, I remember, so I transferred to U of M in Arbor, and I remember my first semester there, I was really struggling with, the educational aspect. It's definitely a step up, and I was just very worried about the grades, not being good enough to even be in that school, suffering from imposter syndrome. I remember one of my friends telling me, like, you're absolutely crazy, you worked so hard to get into that school, you're just being ungrateful, like, you made it in, so you're going to get through it. And that wasn't the case. I know that I got in, obviously. Right. I just need help working out these thoughts. Like, that's why I'm venting to you.
Mm-hmm. And for those of you listening who may not be familiar with imposter syndrome, I'm really happy you brought that up. Imposter syndrome is something that I think the majority of people in our community, as well as other minority communities, struggle with. And it's essentially feeling like every good thing that happens to you, or every accolade that you get, or every new step of success in your life, is not because you deserve it or because you're smart enough or good enough. It's because people just must see something in you that like people are crazy to believe in you, or so you think you're an imposter, you think you don't belong, you think you didn't deserve that award. And that's actually something I'm still working through. No matter what good thing happens in my life, and alhamdulillah, a lot of great things have happened in my life, I'm always like, me? No. That person must have someone must have talked to them to let me into Michigan. Someone must have just really liked me and gave me a chance because they felt bad for me. Those are the thoughts that I think accompany imposter syndrome, and especially if you deal with other mental health illnesses, those thoughts can kind of exacerbate the other thoughts you're having.
One of the imposter syndrome that I was going through was because multiple people within our community actually were telling me that the reason I had gotten in was because I fit up all these boxes
that
Ann Arbor wants.
What? They don't even count you as a person of color, which is an issue in itself.
Because I wrote my essays about my cultural background, my religious background, being a hijabi. So they could just read your essays and you'd be the token person accepted into the university. And I remember feeling so defeated when my friend told me that, or multiple people actually told me that, because that's not why I got in, obviously.
Right.
It was because of my resume, my grades, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't because I was the token hijabi.
So let me pause us there, because this reminds me of our episode with Maryam Jalul, our first episode, where she had a similar issue. When she got into Harvard, people were always trying to tell her it was because she's a hijabi woman. When people say that, nobody wants to address the fact that being a hijabi woman, I'm sure, actually brings a lot of barriers throughout your life, post 9/11 Islamophobic barriers that you're
harder.
So how are you going to tell me I got in this one moment, this helped me, when in reality you're not thinking of the ways that this might have been challenging. And I know in our conversations you discussed hijab and just that identity in itself also being part of anxiety. And I'm wondering if you can speak more to that, you as well, because I know you had hijab on before, and that's something that I think both of you can relate to.
You go first. I've been talking too long.
Well, I struggled with hijab for the past 4 years since I delivered my first son, and mainly it was because of my postpartum depression. I first took it off, but then I felt like I was still in the same way. It had nothing really to do with the scarf. But then I went to so many doctors, but they were not helping me at all through my postpartum depression. They just kept telling me, giving me medicine after medicine after medicine, and none of those helped me at all. And then I would get comments from girls on Instagram, you you're this because you took off your scarf. You really don't have any mental health problem. You just want to take your scarf off so you can wear shorts. And it's like, that's not the reason why.
When did you decide to put on the hijab?
I first put it on, I want to say I was 17.
Okay.
Like 16, 17 years old.
And then
there.
when did you make the decision to take it off?
Well, the first time I took it off was after my son was born in 2014.
Okay.
And so for the past 4 years, sometimes I wear turban, sometimes I wrap my hair, or I do my hair.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a struggle, like, I've been trying to go through, just trying to find myself, basically. If that makes sense.
So what, just out of curiosity, what was it that made you decide to take it off? Because I know you said the depression was playing a role in that, and you didn't feel better after. Well, what was it? How did your relationship to hijab change after you had your child?
Honestly, it's the thoughts inside my head. Like, I get so many negative thoughts. Oh, maybe if I didn't wear a scarf, like, this would happen, or this would happen. And I know it has nothing to do with the scarf. Maybe there's something wrong with me, but
no,
it's just, like...
I'm sure you're not the only, and if you're getting emotional, that's normal. Like, this is a conversation around mental health. I was at my house crying last night, so tears I'm very comfortable with them.
Okay.
But to kind of like affirm you, I don't think any of us on this table are happy with the thoughts that are in our head.
no, definitely not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just kind of pathetic that, like, people would actually write people who are struggling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that something you've experienced?
Yeah, I mean, I also get very emotional talking about it, so I apologize in advance.
Don't apologize for that.
But I think it's very upsetting when people in our community write me off as non-hijabi and say that I shouldn't even be able to post about, like, World Hijab Day, or say, like, with my hijabi sisters or something on Instagram posts, because I don't wear it, quote unquote, right. And I think for me, I kind of let go of the idea of pleasing everybody once I actually visited Iran last summer to visit my mother's family for the first time in 15 years. So I remember going to Iran and seeing so many women wearing the hijab like me. And these were women who 5 times a day, they would rush to prayer. They were seen as practicing Muslim women. And then when I would go to Dearborn, it's as if, like, I can't, go in the corner of the library and pray the hood or something, just because of how I wear my hijab.
Wow.
And I remember it being...
That's very ironic.
Yeah, very ironic, yeah. And I remember actually, so I'm from Qom in Iran, which is where one of the shrines is. So at the shrines, you see people from different countries. One of the countries are people from Lebanon.
Yeah.
I remember my cousin, she asked me, she was like, oh, like, why do they wear their hijab like that? Like, it looks kind of weird. Like, why would they want to do that? And I started laughing because I told her they say the same thing about you. And to me, it finally affirmed that hijab is something, yes, it is religious, but it is also highly informed by the cultures that we come from. How women wear hijab in Central Africa is very different from how women in Saudi Arabia wear hijab versus Lebanon, versus Bosnia, versus America, versus even here in the States.
Right.
So it's something that I don't think will ever reach some kind of baseline for what it is. And I genuinely hope that me being on this podcast and Sammar talking as well will really challenge people to think about what they actually believe about the meaning of hijab, and to recognize that it's a spiritual practice that is never going to be linear. It's always something that has its ups and its downs.
Yeah. One thing I always like to add, because we've had a couple conversations on this, is that I really love Hijab Talk's mission because of what I've heard it's done for other hijabi women, and how they're able to walk into a space where they don't feel like they're going to be judged by the women in that space, and voice the concerns that they have with something that is part of their identity. Like, we all have identities that we hold close to us, but there's always crises. Yeah, I guess that's the word. Crises that we have with those identities where, like you said, it's not linear, and we should have spaces where we can discuss the days where we're not feeling good about that thing that we also claim proudly. You know, I feel like I've heard from a lot of hijabi women that they're very proud, but that doesn't mean you can't question it one day or feel bad when other people are wearing their shorts, or, you know? So I just love that that's a space that is open now, because I've heard a lot that the hijabi community also experiences a lot of the judgment and the shame that I think we all can understand in Dearborn. How do you think that that shame culture and that judgment builds on issues like anxiety or depression? What role do they play together?
I think, to bring up an anecdote, one of my friends, I was just talking to her the other day actually, she used to wear the hijab, but because, you know, people had started to find out certain things about her while she was wearing the hijab, it made her feel very, very ashamed. It made her have really, really anxious thoughts. And because of that, she has since taken it off permanently. She has no desire to put it back on again, because she thinks that people put her on this pedestal, and she just doesn't want to deal with that kind of ridicule. And I can't blame her. What can we tell women who go through those kind of scenarios? Like, you can just keep going through it. This is part of you wearing hijab. Just get through it. You can't. Because we really need to take a look at the people who are saying things to begin with. Why do they think that they have the authority to say these things to begin with? You don't. So please stop talking.
So the immediate counter
Sorry for getting angry.
No. First of all, everybody on this table right now needs to stop apologizing for having emotions, because there's other women watching us right now who are learning from that apology, and I don't want younger girls to think that they need to apologize when they cry or apologize when they get mad about things that we have every right to be mad about. And I'm going to say something that's going to make everyone else more mad right now, because the immediate counter argument to that statement, which obviously I don't believe, but I've heard a lot of times in Dearborn, unfortunately, is like, well, she put on the hijab, and so, and mind you, this is a male voice for a reason. She put on the hijab, and so she should just know that that's how people are going to look at her. Like, she asked for it. And if you don't want people to judge you, then don't put on the hijab. Nobody told you to do it. What would you say to that very, unfortunately, common opinion?
I can't speak on the hijab because I don't wear it, but I feel like that statement is just so hypocritical, because even though I don't wear the hijab, I share the same religion as everyone on this table, and I should be held up to the same standard as them, even though I don't, you know, practice wearing the hijab. But the things that I do and the morals that I have should be, you know, held as high as much as they are. I shouldn't be doing things that they can't, quote unquote, do just because I don't wear it. I shouldn't be doing those things either. So I don't think they should, whoever's making that statement should put us in a box, you know, just because I don't practice culturally my religion the same way. We should be following our religion, you know, equally.
I think for me, because I've heard counter arguments, like, it's okay if you talk to them in private, if you reach out to them through DM or through texting or taking them out for coffee and talking to them, like sitting down and talking to them about this thing. Even for me...
Sitting down and talking to who? Hijabi women?
Yeah. Okay. Like, I've heard many, many people who've even tried to do this with me, where you go out under the guise of, you know, just going out, hanging out, and they eventually tell you at some point, like, listen... You're not an actual hijabi. Like, I don't know how to break it to you. You're not an actual hijabi. What are you doing? Kind of thing. Like, you're making us, you're putting shame in the community. You're embarrassing us. Blah, blah, blah. I work in the field of politics, and I've had many people tell me, don't go into politics wearing that kind of hijab. It's going to make us look really bad. I actually know people who don't consider Ilhan Omar a hijabi because she occasionally wears it as a turban.
Interesting.
And they write her off as, even though she is getting death threats because she's a hijabi, because she wears a turban, like, that's it. She can't be a hijabi. But back to what I would say to these people, my parents really instilled in me and my siblings to be very introspective. And they always said, before you look to somebody else for something that they might be doing wrong, you really have to take a look in the mirror. and what exactly are you doing wrong with yourself, and work on that first. And that's a quote that you'll find from Nabi Muhammad, Imam Ali, everybody.
Michael Jackson too.
Yeah.
But I think there's something to be said about that, and I don't think it's like, don't throw shade at them, throw shade at yourself, because I think it could be interpreted that way. I think it's more so like, while you're over here judging other people, humble yourself and realize that there's still a lot to be done right here. And maybe that'll help you see what internal wars and battles those people are also dealing with, you know? Because if we have our own wars and battles that we're each dealing with, that we know about, and we know how that helps or hinders us from navigating this world, imagine what other people are dealing with that you have no way of knowing, really.
Obviously, yeah, I'm not saying look in the mirror to the extent to which you're like, you know?
I completely get what you're saying. I just want to clarify, because I think sometimes it could be taken as like, it could be a lack of self-loving way to look at yourself as well, if it's misinterpreted.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why so many girls struggle with wearing the hijab in the first place.
Why?
People like that, the comments.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a blogger, Dina in Tokyo, she took off her scarf maybe last year. She made a 40-minute YouTube video of all the hate comments and death threats she got. Just because she decided to take off her scarf, because she was saying how her view of modesty changed because she's 30 now. She's not a 19-year-old girl who started blogging.
Right.
I mean, and she got so many death threats, and I mean, it was ridiculous.
And that right there is like putting her into depression.
Yeah.
So
then I feel like, anything that puts you up for more scrutiny in a community like Dearborn, and I like, you know, Nada said, neither of us can speak to hijab, but any situation or public figure image, or like, you're part of this family, anything that puts you under a microscope in Dearborn, I feel like has so much potential to lead to anxiety and mental health, or anxiety and depression and other mental health issues. And that's kind of what I was. So you feel like that?
I feel like the community can do better with helping people. If someone's struggling with hijab or with depression or anything, you help them. You don't tear them down by calling them names or making fun of them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why girls are struggling with the scarf or struggling with depression. Because you keep making fun of someone, it's not going to help them. Like, how many people in our community committed suicide in this past year?
I was just about to bring that up. Yeah.
Like, it's pathetic.
It's really, I think the issue, and if I'm going to be empathetic to the people in the community, I don't think people realize what their judgment and scrutiny is doing. I really don't think that people realize when they're saying these crazy comments on TCD, or like even something that infuriates me is the way that grief is handled in the community. I think that's kind of like, we need to do better with how we talk about losing loved ones, and there's just that's like a whole nother soapbox. But I think to relate it back to what you just said, something we talked about recently on one of these table talks is that 3 children in the community died in 3 days, and everyone in Dearborn feels so entitled to these parents talking about their kids' death. And so I'm not in any way, shape, or form, let me just disclaimer, I'm not saying we shouldn't be having these conversations around mental health. Clearly, I wouldn't be here if I felt that way, right? But I think that we're not respectful of people who are grieving sometimes. And it is not that it's not that one parent's burden to sit and create a whole campaign around how their kid died. If the parent decides that that's what they want to do, all power to them. If the parent wants to be private about that kid's situation and preserve the dignity that child has left, given that they're no longer here to represent themselves, all power to them. I think it's on us to realize that there was an issue before that child died. Like, whether that child passed away or not, there was still an issue that led to that. And people aren't really discussing that issue to begin with. And what I would like to see is us realize the ways in which we treat each other and talk to each other and talk about each other and scrutinize each other is very much so directly correlated to people feeling that way about themselves and resorting to something like drugs, if that's what it was, or something like overdose, you know?
I mean, people shouldn't be ashamed to like come forward and say, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with depression or anxiety. I mean, we should be able to talk about these things because we don't need any more suicides. I mean, people keep dying, and I mean, it has to stop.
But think about that though, like, we're trying to urge the community to talk about things. And then when people die, the comments about their death are so judgmental. It's like, if I was struggling, I'm going to be honest. If I was struggling deeply with depression or anxiety, I probably wouldn't talk. I don't know because I can't speak from that. I don't know that I would be willing to put myself up for that scrutiny, because even at worst case scenario, when somebody passes away, we still aren't lending empathy to that person because we think they did it to themselves. Like, if I'm seeing that, it's like, man, like, what would people say about me? And I'm still here, you know? Mm-hmm. What would people have to say about someone like me?
There's comments on those page. I remember comments. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. But then you can tell if a person, if they're depressed or if they're going through something. But the problem is, people don't ask.
But sometimes you can't tell someone is going through something. You could see someone who looks happy every second of the day, but depression only hits them when they're alone, and they only let it show when they're by themselves because they don't want people to see. You never know what someone's going through. You could think that they have the best life. You could envy them and think that, you know, they're going places, but deep down they could really be going through things you just don't know.
I think a lot of this, I really truly hope that a lot of people take a hard look at their friendships, because so many of these people, I understand that many of us can't talk to our families about our mental health problem, but we should be able to go to our friends, our chosen family, for our mental health problems, and our friends shouldn't be the ones to tell us, you're crazy, you need to get over it, you just have to pray, you just have to do this, this, and that. That's not what a friend is. We need to normalize what it looks like to befriend somebody who suffers from anxiety and depression. And how can you help? I'm not saying you should be the therapist for your friend.
Yeah.
But be the person that tells your friend, I will go with you to therapy. I will sit in the lobby as you're in therapy.
So how do you reconcile that? I 100% agree. How do you reconcile that opinion with the fact that oftentimes, let's say I have two of my best friends, and each of them are struggling with their own mental health issue, and neither of them will admit that to themselves. And so if you're not admitting that to yourself, this is hypothetical, by the way. Yeah. If you're not admitting it to yourself, you're definitely not going to see a therapist. And the messages you're telling yourself are, just get over it, just get over it, get over it. How can you be a good friend to somebody else who's then dealing with an issue if you aren't able to be that person for yourself? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I'm all about accountability, and it's 100% our choice to decide who, like you said, chosen family. But I think there's also something to be said about the fact that we can't turn around and judge the community for saying things that are very much so reflective of the lack of support they're giving themselves as individuals. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like, that's always where I'm just caught in this pickle. I'm like, man, like, we need to do better. But if we're not doing better, that means we're not being better for ourselves either. And that makes me really sad. And so my question to you all from there is, like, how do we move forward from here?
So I guess for me, in my friend group, like my inner circle, I'm talking about inner circle here, not just not random, but not just like the people you occasionally hang out with. Your inner circle of people, I definitely think that the key is having an open line of communication. That's the key to all of my friendships, is having an open line of communication. I've definitely had friends who have told me, we're just not in the space right now to help you with your anxiety, and I appreciate that a lot more than somebody who ghosts me for days on end.
Wow.
A lot more.
That's a good point.
Yeah, just be honest. An open line of communication. I've also been in situations where my friend has gone through something and I just can't relate to it, and I say, I really don't know how to empathize or relate to the situation you're going through, but let me bring up these resources. Maybe it'll help you. Just an open line of communication. Again, your friends aren't your therapist, but they should be people who are willing to go with you to the appointment.
Yeah.
But then again, some friends get offended if you ask them if they have depression or anything. And
if you're trying to be there for them,
yeah,
why do you think
and that's what happened to me. I asked my friend like how she was doing, because I had postpartum depression, and I kind of saw it in her a little bit, and she totally got mad, and I haven't talked to her since.
Why do you think that happened?
Well, I think she just didn't want to admit it, because that's how I felt when I first had my son. I didn't want to admit it. I mean, when the doctor gave me that little, like, checklist, check off how you're feeling, I just checked off no, but you could see my face.
What was the question? What happened with the doctor?
Are you feeling depressed? Check yes or no. I'm like, no. Do you feel any negative thoughts about hurting your child? No. Do you feel like hurting yourself? No. Are you getting, like, negative thoughts? No. Mm-hmm. But you can see my face. Like, I just went in, like, you can see, like, my face. Like, I was just, usually I dress up. I didn't care how I looked. I really didn't care.
Why did you check no instead of answering how you felt?
Because I had this feeling, like, if I check yes, maybe they'll take away my kid or put me, like, in a mental hospital or something like that. And that's how I felt. I didn't want to admit to myself or to the doctor either. Because I had that fear of, okay, what's going to happen to my kid or what's going to happen to me if I say yes.
Had you tried to talk to anyone about it? Like, when you knew that you had postpartum depression or when you, like, admitted it to yourself, was there anyone that you found helpful to talk to?
Well, there's a therapist, but they were not certified for what I was going through, basically, if that makes sense.
Okay.
For postpartum depression, but nothing really helped from what their experience is in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But they did put me on medication. I was on 6 different medications, and none of them helped me at all. And I'm currently on one right now, which is actually helping me. I've been on it for 2 months now. And at least, like, I'm out of the house today.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, it's just day by day for me.
Right.
Really.
Small victories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what could you kind of recommend to moms or, you know, pregnant women in Dearborn who have went through that, or just advice before they give birth? What would you say to them?
First, like, to actually admit it. Don't do what I do, which is, like, waiting, because it just makes it worse. I mean, I wish I would have came open sooner to someone, and maybe I would have been better sooner and been a better mom to both my kids and actually, like, had fun with them. Because, like, when both my kids were first born, it's like I didn't want to have that attachment to them. Like, that's how I felt. Like, it was nothing against them. It's just how I was feeling.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah. And
do you feel like you judged yourself at any point?
I judged myself a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
I feel like mothers in general, especially like with your firstborn, it's just the world puts so much pressure on women that it lends itself to so much judgment, and then dealing with postpartum depression on top of all of that. Yeah. You feel like you continue to judge yourself.
And I just feel like the doctors, though, they should do more. Like, when you deliver, they're supposed to come out to your house, make sure everything's okay. No one ever gave me that phone call, make sure I'm okay, or anything like that. And, like, that's when I was going through, like, my hard time. Like, I wish someone, like, came to check on me, because my husband was gone working all the time, you know? And I was a new mom by myself, just me and my new baby. Yeah. I couldn't leave the house for, like, 40 days, you know? Couldn't take him out anywhere. And it's depressing just staying home, not being able to do anything. It really, really is. Like, what am I going to do?
Have you felt judgment from the community a lot? I know you said the community doesn't take this as a serious issue. Have you also felt like people judge you for having this problem to begin with?
They do, because when I went to one of the mosque, I'm not going to say which one. I just don't want it.
Yeah, no problem.
I asked the imam, like, in front of everybody, what he thought of postpartum depression. His words were to go read the Quran.
That's something I hear a lot. So, for any issue, and I'm a Muslim. I love being a Muslim. Obviously, going to preface it with that. But I think that the issue of thinking that reading the Quran or praying is going to solve issues that, in a lot of ways, are so much deeper than whether or not you're faithful. Like, I know for me, sometimes when I feel anxiety start to build, I just start, like, reciting the Fatiha, and sometimes it makes me feel better. See, but, like, I also don't struggle with anxiety. I have anxious moments.
And then it doesn't work for everyone.
It absolutely doesn't.
And then you feel bad, like you're not close enough to your deen or your religion.
That's how I feel like it's... Yeah. Have any of you experienced that, where you're made to feel like you have to read the Fatiha or talk to an imam or, like, get closer to God, and if you try that and it's not working, then there's something wrong with you and you're not doing it right?
Yeah.
Like,
that's how you were made to feel?
Yes. When I was going through, like, I took advice. I read the Quran. You know, I was praying more. But I felt good in those moments, but when I'm done praying or done reading the Quran, it hits me right back.
It's a short-term solution to a
Yeah.
long-term problem. I think, like, reading the Quran definitely in the moment provides temporary bliss, even for me as somebody who suffers with anxiety.
Yeah.
But after I read the Quran, I really sit there and reflect, what can I do to kind of really, lessen these thoughts that I'm having in my head, and what are some coping mechanisms that I can develop to help with my anxiety. So, prayer, religion, all of it, in terms of anxiety and depression, could provide temporary bliss for somebody who is suffering. But overall, you still need to develop
a permanent solution.
Which could come in the form of anti-anxiety and antidepressant medication, or just different things that people could work on with their therapist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. How do you all think that, given that these topics are clearly so taboo in the community, how can we start to move forward raising awareness, seeking out therapy, seeking help, if we're not even at the first stage of being able to admit it to ourselves or talk about it publicly?
Honestly, this is something that I was telling my friend the other day. I feel as though these conversations are gaining the attention of people who want to have these conversations, but not necessarily the people who need to hear these types of conversations.
Yeah.
We're not reaching the amos and the khaltos who say those comments, like anxiety and depression are a result of low iman, or even people in our generation who make those comments, because there's plenty of people in our generation who make those kind of comments.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of advertisement and marketing has to be done to reach those people, but even when there's a town hall on drug addiction and alcoholism that's rampant in our community, it's typically attended by people who have either suffered from it themselves or have a family member who has gone through it.
Yeah.
So how do we reach the people who seem to be untouchable to this type of stuff?
Yeah.
I feel there should be, events around mental health. I mean, over the past 4 years, I've done 6-7 fashion events, but I have not seen anyone there from, speaking on mental health or anything. I mean, I feel there needs to be events on where to get information about mental health for different types, postpartum depression, anxiety, etc.
Right.
I think there needs to be more research within the community. There needs to be numbers and facts, because that's what people listen to. That's what people believe, rather than people just talking about it, because it's easy to say something than it is to actually act on it and see proof. I think people want to see proof, and I think we need to really start with the older generation, because they're the ones that don't want to talk about it. Their kids feel like they can't even go to them because their parents are just going to turn them away and, don't say that. People are going to talk about you. People are going to think that there's something wrong with you. Just don't talk about it. You'll get over it. Or it's a phase. So I think we need to start with the older generation, and also look into genetics, because I feel like there could be some illnesses that run in the family that our generation wouldn't even know about, because their parents or their family members are not talking about it. For example, if someone in your family has cancer, they're going to come to you and say, hey, I have cancer. Maybe you should go get screened and make sure that you're not going to get it in the future. It should be the same with mental health.
Wow.
If I have something wrong with me mentally, then, hey, listen, I have something wrong with me. You need to go get yourself screened.
Why do you think, I'm so glad you said that, why do you think it is that we're willing to be transparent and open about our physical health issues, but we're hush-hush about our mental health issues?
Because people are embarrassed.
Why are they embarrassed? What do they think?
I think it's more...
They see it as a
families.
negative.
Yeah.
They see it as something negative, like there's something wrong with you, and that there's no cure.
I mean, if I have cancer, there's something wrong with me.
I'm going to get judged.
But
my family's going to think this. Oh, she's going to go tell my family.
It's so interesting.
They look at it like you're crazy.
They look
she's
at it like
insane.
I feel like they almost, because cancer, nobody's going to look at someone and be like, you have cancer, that's your fault.
Yeah,
they look at it like you're a victim, you're
yeah,
suffering from this thing, or you're a survivor, I should say. When you're dealing with a mental health issue, I feel like there's this stigma around, you did this to yourself, or you can get over it. It's not like this thing is happening to you, or I'm struggling with this thing. It's you chose to look at yourself this way, or you chose to do this to yourself.
Right.
And
They also think it's uncurable.
Mm.
And that's the sad part of it, is when any of us see somebody who's struggling in a physical manner, so cancer, even the flu, like pneumonia, whatever, we say, they'll go through chemo, they'll take antibiotics, it's curable, it's okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, people think that depression, anxiety, OCD, they're uncurable, there's no kind of solution to it at all. And that's what it comes down to. Why do people think that it's something that you'll never be able to get past or work with instead of against?
Yeah. What do you think people are scared of? You brought up a point, Nada, about they don't want other people to know that, like, the older generation oftentimes feels like it's this shameful, embarrassing thing around other people knowing you have this thing. Why don't they want other people to know that?
I think just in our community as a whole, we're afraid that people are going to talk. We're afraid that people are going to spread rumors and people are going to gossip. And I think that's why people keep these things private, because they think that they're benefiting themselves, when in reality they're just holding in their problems, and that's like very unhealthy. So I think there needs to be more normalization of it.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And also, like, reputation, they don't want to ruin their reputation. I've seen a lot of girls and guys do that.
Yeah.
They just want to keep it hidden and not talk to anyone, thinking, oh, maybe tomorrow I'll be fine, or something like that.
Why is it that admitting, and I'm asking just for the sake of conversation, I think I have a hunch as to why, but it's just so interesting that saying that you struggle with depression, that you struggle with anxiety, can ruin your reputation. Like, why?
It's because of that judgment. Like, when, I post about my postpartum depression all the time.
Yeah.
Because I like to, let people know, oh, today I'm doing okay, tomorrow I might not be. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's the comments, too, is, people just get over yourself. Oh, you wake up and just be happy.
Yeah.
I mean...
Oh, yeah, choose happiness.
Yeah. They think, just choose to be happy and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Or, tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah.
They use that. And I think people see it as a joke, too. It's like, oh, if you're feeling like, I have anxiety. Oh, you're just saying that for attention. I think a lot of people see people seeking attention, and they're really just crying out for help. They're, when they do try to talk about it, well, I don't want to talk about it because people are going to think I'm feeling sorry for myself, or I need attention. And
so that's what someone said
I'm getting
to me.
flashbacks because so many people have actually told me that me having anxiety and talking about it is me seeking attention and me wanting to have some kind of aura about me that people feel bad about me.
Yeah.
And that makes me have even more anxiety that everybody around me just pities me.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. So that's not
it's
the
very
case.
sad because people think, oh, they're suffering, but why do they want to tell people? They just want attention. They want to get noticed or this.
They want the pity points.
Yeah, but that's not the case at all. It's, well, for me, I want to spread awareness about the topic, but maybe it'll help me along the way.
Right. And it's sad that something that is comforting for you, which is to express what you're feeling, is now that people are adding a layer of shame around the one thing that is actually helping you.
Yeah.
I experienced that when I was dealing with a lot of grief. Well, I still am. Obviously, my dad passed away a few years ago. Oh, yeah. And for the longest, I was embarrassed to talk about it. And I'm like, the voice in my head was like, bro, it's been a year, chill. It's been a year, get over it. And it's obviously, what? No, and grief for those who've experienced it will know that it's very linear, just like other mental health issues. I can relate to
that. My dad died also when I was 6.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, it's a shame that I think the perceived judgment that we feel from the community infiltrates our minds, and it ends up being this voice in our head that talks to us when we're struggling.
Yeah.
And what I'm working on now is just editing that voice. As soon as that voice is somewhat judgmental or mean, I literally reframe that statement and just make it a more nice, compassionate one.
I kind of feel there should be a center in Dearborn or somewhere where anyone can go to get help with depression and any type of depression. I mean,
yeah.
There is Access. Access does have a mental health department.
I went there and they couldn't help me.
Yeah, I heard it's terrible. But.
Yeah. I mean, when I was Googling
why do we think that it... why didn't it help you? I'm curious. Because this is good for people to hear.
They really didn't know much about postpartum depression. And see, when when I was really going through it at my bad stage, I would Google like stuff, like centers for postpartum depression.
Yeah.
And they're all through churches and stuff. And I think our mosque should have something like that. Because that's kind of amazing. Like a church is helping people with
There's
mothers.
my mental wellness that we actually had in a Sabaya series episode as well, who are housed in a mosque. And basically, I don't think that the services are Islamic services per se, but I think it's speaking to the same point where it's like this is a community thing.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the needs of the community, if we are religious, if we are Muslim, you can't look at these issues in a vacuum. A lot of people want to talk about these issues in light of also being Muslim. So I think that's definitely a resource. Yeah. There are a lot of resources that I don't think we're doing a good job promoting because we can't even talk about the issue to start talking about it.
We're too busy promoting food.
Everybody's packed with fajani.
And Dearborn is so great at promoting other things, you know? And that's honestly one of the biggest things we want out of this space is like, one thing Yasmin and I and Malak and I always talk about is that every issue that we've had so far is actually a mental health issue. Yeah. We're talking about relationships and divorce, that's a mental health issue. We're talking about body image, that's a mental health issue. Judgment, everything boils down in Dearborn to a mental health issue because the fact remains we're not allowed to talk about things. And I'm sure all of you know that whatever you're dealing with just only gets heightened by not being able to actually talk about it for the reasons you just said.
Yeah. Back to what you were saying about the church thing offering those mental health services. I think it goes back to what I had mentioned earlier in the phone call yesterday, which is that for some reason, Muslims think that being religious and having anxiety and depression are somehow at odds with each other.
Yeah, I agree.
So
it's mutually exclusive.
Yeah, so like a masjid is definitely not going to have a mental health type of resource if they think that people who suffer from mental health shouldn't even be welcomed into the mosque because clearly they have low faith or something like that.
That's something that the group that I just mentioned, My Mental Wellness, is working on, and that's something they expressed. And I'm only saying this because I feel like if they were at the table, they would want me to say this, in that they really, because they agree with you 100%, they feel very passionately about our religious leaders being properly educated around these issues because, as we all know, we've all attended either, unfortunately, a spua or any other religiously
ceremony,
like a religious ceremony where, you know, a religious leader is speaking, and when he's speaking, they have a platform, and people are really listening in those vulnerable moments. And the women were speaking to the amount of times where those platforms were used irresponsibly, unfortunately, to try to make it seem like, again, these issues are someone's fault, or if they just prayed more, they could have dealt with it. And I think those moments are especially impactful because you have these people in a room, all ears, wanting to know the answer, you know, because when you're sad, you're vulnerable. And when that's just being injected into us, it just adds on to the shame and judgment we already feel about issues that we should have been talking about to begin with.
I agree with that.
Yeah. One thing you discussed yesterday, Nour, is that I think just back to the conversation around why the older generation feels like they can't talk about things or is afraid because of this reputation and this stigma. You brought up an interesting point about women feeling like they're never going to get married. And I'm sure men experience this as well.
Too. Yeah,
I'm sure men do as well. I think I'm going to just go ahead and say I think it's harder on us because in our community, unfortunately, it's always like the woman is trying to find someone and the man is
not really looking.
Is aloof. Yeah, he's looking.
I want to be fair to our men who are looking, but I definitely think for every 5 women who are looking, there's 1 man who's looking. I have to guess. That might be the ratio.
I think it's 20-1.
Maybe. You might be right. My math isn't so great. But I think you brought up a really interesting point about how talking about mental wellness can make, or lack thereof, you know, if someone's not at a place where they feel well, that could lead to them not being attractive
marriage option. Yeah,
marriage option. Why do you think that is?
I've seen it happen within my own family. I've seen it happen in the families of my friends where, and I think it's completely detrimental. Yeah. Because, you know, if these things aren't discussed before you two get married, they come up after you get married, and that's an even bigger issue. The fact that some people don't even know that their in-laws might suffer from schizophrenia, PTSD, anxiety, depression before you get married, I think that's incredibly, incredibly sad that you can't have a discussion with the person you claim to be in love with that, hey, my mom and dad have this, and I just need you to know this before we move forward in our relationship.
Right.
Why is it that what my parents or my siblings or whoever, why is it that whatever they're going through, why is it a reflection of me and my value and my worth and whether or not I'm marriageable? I think it's BS. And that is why so many people aren't open about mental health and why so many khaltas and ammas aren't open about their own mental health between each other, because they don't want their own kids to be hurt by their own mental health problems.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
Like if you're a, older, khalta who has something, you're not going to want people to know that you suffer from PTSD from the numerous wars that you have gone through because you're terrified that your son or your daughter isn't going to get married. That's so crazy.
But I like that you're saying that, because I think underlying that, while it is detrimental, are good intentions. Like, that person is trying to do what they think is help that person, when in reality, if that khalto or whoever in that situation realized that you're actually hurting not just your daughter or your son in that situation, but even the person they marry and the kids they end up having by not disclosing that information. I think if they really, really, really understood, once again, I don't remember who it was that said that they don't think it's curable. Maybe if people thought that these things were treatable, and they would be more willing to disclose it, because at the end of the day, I'm sure that that person in that situation wants what's best for their kid, wants what's best for their grandkids.
But it's also beyond that. Why can't people in our community realize that the reason we're even here to begin with, like just speaking on behalf of my own parents, they were UN refugees.
Yeah.
They were displaced by war and terrible governmental regimes. Of course they're going to have something.
Right.
And of course, so many people in our community, their parents are going to have something because they were displaced by the Lebanese Civil War, or like Palestinian, like the Nakba. Of course something's going to happen,
100%.
Yeah.
Why can't we just admit that it's just a thing within our community, and we shouldn't be working against the grain. We should be going with it and working towards a better future for our kids and our generation, the next generation to come.
Yeah.
See, I agree with that. If my kid was going through something, I would want to know to help them. I mean, before suicide or anything like that.
Right.
But they have to
that's my
create
fear.
that open space, and they have to be listeners, and they can't just shoo away what their kids are telling them. They have to be able to listen and accept it and then go and help.
I agree.
Wow.
I talked.
No, you're good. I'm thinking, because it's just like, I think that throughout this whole conversation, it's like my brain is doing circles, and I don't know, like, I don't have the answers, and I think a lot of the reason, once again, we wanted to start this space is because I think conversation is where we start, like you said, creating those open spaces. But I would love to go around and just ask every one of us at this table, what would you say to, sitting where you're at now with your perspective, what would you say to yourself a year ago on this topic?
Start now?
Yep, whoever feels inspired.
A year ago, I would say to myself to get help and not to just hide it under the bus, basically, and to admit I actually had a problem and how to deal with it, and actually talk to someone about it.
Yeah.
And when someone talked to me, just push them away, basically.
I can go next. So for me, and by the way, I put you all on the spot. I'm putting myself on the spot, not to. But a year ago, I think I would tell myself to stop being attached to this fake image of perfection all the time. I knew I wasn't perfect, but I just somehow was aspiring to this very unrealistic, very idealistic image of what I thought I should be. And instead of focusing on the process of getting there, I was just always hyper-focused on the gap between who I feel like I am now and that person, and that was creating a lot of self-judgment and self-deprecation and negative thoughts that wouldn't have been the case had I just been more self-compassionate.
I think a year ago I would have told myself to stop trying to please everyone else and make everyone else happy and be that person to whoever needed it, and just focus on myself and my own growth. Because I think that sometimes you do have to be selfish, and you have to take care of yourself first before you can even try taking care of someone else.
That's a cliche for a reason. That is so true.
I would also say the same thing to myself, and I would add on to be incredibly mindful of who you befriend and who your inner circle is, because they definitely influence how you feel about yourself and your mental health.
Absolutely.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
if your friends are constantly degrading you, or even just saying these like backhanded compliments, blah blah blah, they definitely shouldn't be in your life. No.
Snip, snip.
Snip.
I just had to make you laugh after that. So I do want to take this opportunity first to say, if you or someone else you know needs help, please call the emergency telephone, suicide prevention, and referrals for mental health services at 313-224-7000, or for free confidential counseling, crisis information, and referrals, dial 1-800-232-1127. And absolutely want to take this opportunity to thank each of you so much for being raw and honest in your whole selves today. I know this is not an easy conversation to talk about. I want to especially thank you for being raw and real with your emotions, because I think that gives other people permission to do the same thing. Thank you, ladies, so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.